Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What is awesome health? It's actually an acronym that stands for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mental beliefs and attitudes, and education. These are the pillars of peak health, and my team and I have created a free 12-week course that you can use to transform. Each day, you'll get a written and video lesson delivered to your inbox. Everything is covered from the foundations of digestion to advanced alternative therapies few people know about. And again, it's 100% free. Just go to bioptimizers.com. That's bioptimizers.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we're going to talk about a topic that is very, very important for your longevity, and that is mouth mapping and oral health. In other words, a lot of people just think of, you go to the dentist if you got some, you need a tooth pulled, or you need to get a dentures, or you have some inflammatory condition or something like that. But today's guest, Dr. Jonathan Levine, is going to be explaining to us the connection between our mouths and our health, especially from a preventative side. And I think it's the new way that people are looking at dentistry these days is they're not seeing it as something that you go to when there's a problem. It's also how do you prevent and practice for the long term, because there are many different implications of not having good mouth health that can contribute to your health and well-being long term. And so a little background on Dr. Levine. He is a world-renowned oral health expert and dental longevity opinion leader with 35 years of dedication to transforming smiles and lives. His practice, JBL New York City and Smile House, lead the way in integrative dentistry, combining advanced technology with a focus on aesthetics and function to optimize oral health and systemic longevity. A lifelong innovator, Dr. Levine holds 27 patents in aesthetic, therapeutic, and medical device technologies. He is also a prolific author and host of the Think Oral Health podcast, actively shaping how oral care is perceived and who it serves. Dr. Levine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Wade. Appreciate it. Thank you for the kind intro.
Well, we had a few seconds to connect, and you started laying out some stuff that was so good I had to stop you mid-sentence and be impolite because I didn't want my listeners to miss any of the gold nuggets that you're going to throw down. But maybe you can give a background, because you've been around the industry for such a long time, and you're on the bleeding edge with you're putting patents and stuff. So you're not just a guy that's going in and fixing people's teeth. You're thinking about what's the gaps currently and looking into the future of what we can solve with technology. And you also are not just looking at the mouth as a one single compartmentalized unit of the body. You're looking at it as part of the integrated whole. And one of the things that you suggested right off the bat was all of the different complications that can happen on your health profile if you don't have good oral health. And so I want to let you take the floor and kind of explain to us how your background got started in this area, and then what led you to start putting out these patents and thinking in terms of whole body wellness, longevity, and those things. So I laid out a lot there, and I'll just give you the floor.
Yeah. Well, I guess to take it from the beginning, I have to go back to some college years because, like yourself, I was an athlete my whole life, and I'm still pretty crazy athlete. I'm a cyclist, and in college I played a sport called lacrosse, and it's a team sport. And we started from freshman year to sophomore year, and we had a really good team at Cornell, a great coach named Richie Moran, kind of the John Wooden of lacrosse. I was very fortunate. By the time we're seniors, we're undefeated. We become national champs, and we had an extraordinary run, a couple more years of national championships. And what it taught me as a young man is that life's a team sport, that you can really accomplish great things together. Well, I'll fast forward to going to dental school, graduating dental school, and I ended up in dental school because I didn't like hospitals. I lost my grandparents at a young age. I didn't think I liked business because my family business, they were either doctors or furriers, and in the fur business, it's a crazy, wacky business, very disjointed, very everything's on an IOU, nothing organized, no contracts. And I'm sitting around the dinner table as a young man, a young guy, and hearing about all the noise and the conflict. I said, that is not for me. So I leaned towards the science, went to Cornell, played lacrosse, team sport, get out of dental school, and I go, oh my God, I start practicing. And I said, wow, this is such a strange industry. Everybody is siloed, individual. It really isn't a team approach. You know, back then, 35 years ago, it was one dentist, one hygienist, one assistant. You put out a shingle. And I started changing what I thought was needed changing right from the get-go. And I was very fortunate. I met the person, Adrian Jerem, who invented porcelain veneers, how to etch porcelain, him and John Gwinnett from Stony Brook, who did the electron microscopy. And here I am, 26, lecturing to guys 20, 25 years older than me, because I'm one of the first guys in the country to do porcelain veneers. That put me on a road of education, learning, lecturing, academics. I became a specialist, which in dentistry, you can become an orthodontist, gum surgeon, periodontist, oral surgeon, or the small specialty called prosthodontics, which is kind of an interesting adult dentistry specialist that focuses on, yes, aesthetics, but the structure, the function of how everything works together in biology. And that was, for me, something that I was influenced by colleagues. And it was great because it was another bunch of years of learning. So fast forward after that, and I had kind of this innovative growth mindset. And then it was like I was off and running. Let's go change this profession a little bit. Let's go do some unique things. And when I'm going to do something, even practicing my craft, it was always building a team. It was always a team approach. And then that evolved into other areas within the profession.
So 27 patents. I mean, if someone gets one patent, that's a big deal. But 27, you're like a patent machine. What do you feel were what do you feel are some of the most important innovations that you were able to get patents for, and how that contributed to that goal to transform the industry?
You know, what happened was, you start realizing the compromises that exist. So let's look at teeth whitening. There were these high intensity lights that stayed outside the mouth. And I'm on my bike. I think I was in Europe. And all of a sudden I get an idea. I go, oh my God. And I write down on a napkin, well, let's not put the light outside. Let's go build light and heat into a mouthpiece that prevents the oxygens from escaping. Because when you have the gel on the teeth and the lights outside, the oxygens, except for the leading edge of that gel, goes into the air. So the heat generated is very hot, and that's what caused these zingers, these kind of the pain from these heavy, intensive lights. There was a company called Bright Smile. There's a company called Zoom. And what we did is we disrupted that. And so I came up with this idea. It was seat of the pants innovation, but I learned a couple of things of how to do it, without spending a lot of money. And I ended up starting a company, raised a decent amount of bucks, and started a company called Glow Science. And from that, you start with one patent, two patents, and then it just starts organically evolving, especially as you build an innovation team. That worked into also understanding that the mouthpiece also, when used with a proper gel, can get the gums very healthy. And so we started with therapeutic products also. And as Glow Science, we have products in the consumer side and also on the professional side. And, it's just like anything else, you grow organically. In the beginning, it's a little bit of move slow to go fast with that. You surround yourself as much as possible with experts, because we don't know what we don't know. And you go for it, and you take risk. And for me, it was very exciting. For me in the profession, I think most of my colleagues looked at me a little sideways because I was always into like How do we change things? How do we do things differently? And I do have a side of me that is academic. So I always taught. I ran a program at NYU. I'm full professor at NYU. And I've always practiced clinically just 2 days a week for 25 years because I built a team. I had other people like me. I coached lacrosse for 20 years after college in the youth level, in the high school level, and it allowed me to hone my skills of how do you coach up people? How do you inspire them? How do you lead by example? How do you serve them? And we get that from athletics, right? We remember back to athletic days, these coaches that impacted our development was huge for me. And it allowed me to then go out and do something similar. Well, I applied that mindset to business. I applied it to academics, and it has worked well for me because the magic happens when you put the people around the table or on the team that align, right, on vision, on values, where we're going to go. We know where we're going. We trust each other. We got each other's back, just like from any athletic endeavor. And in business is nothing. It's the same thing. It's the same thought process of building high performance teams, which when I realized that business was all about that, that's when I really dove in because it was just like, back in college.
So going from more of a, I guess, a patent model or looking at the industry from that lens, whitening and those others, which are more on the cosmetic side. You did mention about gum disease and taking another step further, not just dealing with that, because that's a very life-altering element if you have gum disease, and it plagues a lot of people. But now you're talking about integrating mouth health with human body health, and maybe what made the connection of like, here's an area that there's a massive gap in the understanding of the public and maybe even the industry professionals, and it needs to be addressed, and you're kind of focused on that. So how did you come to that conclusion, and what were some of the things that people don't know about how their mouth is affecting their health?
Yeah. Well, I was an immunology biochem major at Cornell. And then I studied that again where I went to dental school, BU. I was 2 years in medical school, 2 years in dental. And then you end up, now it's 3 years, 2 years in a post-grad prosthodontic program. So I had a lot of science courses, right? The research in science started coming out about 20 years ago from these INVEST studies from Moisey Devereaux out of Columbia. He's an epidemiologist. And he was one of these early people that was able to show that the pathogenic bacteria, the bacteria in the mouth that causes inflammation in the mouth, can get through the gums, leaky gums, like leaky gut, and I love that expression, and it can end up in these different organs. The circulatory system is the superhighway of the body. Well, they found that bacteria in the carotid artery, in the intermedia, in the inner walls of people with cardiovascular disease. So that was the start of the science. 20 years later, you name a disease, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, leaky gut, low birth weight babies, all of these kind of inflammatory diseases, pancreatic cancer, there is a causal link, or at least one of the risk factors of periodontal disease, which is a chronic inflammation in the mouth. People, we don't think of it as anything important. Like, oh, my gums are bleeding when I brush. Well, that means you have gingival inflammation. 70% of the adult population has some type of inflammation in the mouth. North of 55% has periodontal disease. That is chronic inflammation. What happens when it's chronic? These bacteria work its way into the bloodstream. So if you can find it in leaky gut, the interstitial cells where you have inflammation in your gut, and you can find P. gingivalis there, which is one of the 7 pathogens, how did it get there? And now we know that the mouth, and here's what's important, the mouth bacteria, which is 600 species, 8 billion bacteria, second biggest microbiome of the body, only to the gut, which is about 6-7 trillion. Those bacteria seed the gut. 1 out of 3 gets through the stomach acids and gets into the gut. Okay, so it's going through the circulatory system, it's going through the digestive tract. And so people have to realize that you want to get preventative and we want to get healthy. We have to think of oral health just like every other disease to get upstream and get preventative. How do we do that? In oral health and dentistry, it's actually quite simple, right? You have to have oral health game. It's like a backhand in tennis. You got to have game. So you got to brush for the right amount of time. You got to use the right brush, the right toothpaste, the right floss, the water flosses, the tongue scrapers, pH raising rinse. There's all these kind of tools that we have today that you can have a bacterial balance that is healthy. We call it the homeostatic balance of the mouth. It's the same rules apply to the gut. When you have a leaky gut, what happens is those good bacteria, the commensals, are balancing out with those pathogens. You have to have the pathogens, but they have to be balanced out so you have a diversified neighborhood, a diversified community. So the same rules apply. It's so interesting. And what we do now in dentistry, in these integrative type dental practices like ours, is that we have a standard of care of these baseline diagnostics that allow us to really educate and understand how is our patients doing. Because the mouth microflora is really influenced by a number of environmental factors. What are we eating? What are we drinking? How much acid are we putting in our mouth? Because the acid, high protein foods needs a balancing act with the basic alkalinizing foods. What's that? Leafy vegetables. Mom was always right. Eat your vegetables, eat your fruit, because that's just the alkalinizing that balances out the protein, which is low pH, because the bad bugs thrive in a low pH environment. So what we do as a standard of care is we take a pH of the saliva. We also do salivary diagnostics. There's 3 very good companies where we send the saliva, and in about 10 days, we get a readout of 200 bacteria, a profile, and people get educated. If you're high in Actinomyces concomitans, that means you're going to have this kind of issue. And if you're high in this bacteria, you're going to have bad breath, and right down the line. So the standard of care that's changing in dentistry, and the group of us are trying to lead the way of how we connect dentistry and medicine. We call it DMI, a company called Henry Schein that we're partnering with. We're now working on techniques that when you go for a cleaning, we're going to get a little finger prick. Not only salivary diagnostics, we're going to look at some of those inflammatory markers in your blood, C-reactive protein, and some of these inflammatory markers, even lipids, even baseline blood type testing that the doctors really understand, and we can alert them, you got to get your patient in, because the patients go to the dentist more than they go to their doctors. You ask patients, hey, did you see your private care physician recently? When did you go to your PCP? Oh, I think it was about 3-4 years ago. Oh my God. You know what can happen in 3-4 years, God forbid. And they come to us before, so the dentist could be, this is what we say, is the tip of the spear of getting ahead of these chronic inflammatory diseases, meaning we can go upstream. We can build more of this wellness model by the dental community, and I call us oral physicians, because the last time I looked, the mouth is connected to the rest of the body. Oral physicians are connected now to our medical colleagues, and we work collaboratively, and one day we should have, our data is all on one software. We look at each other's and we communicate and we collaborate that way. And we're moving that way. And there's another number of companies. There's a fantastic company. I give Steve Thorne, CEO, Pacific Dental. He's building integrated medical and dental offices. They have about 1,000 offices. And he is leading the way in this dental service organization companies that, they either roll up the dental practices, they start de novo. Steve started de novo, and he's doing an amazing job in building awareness within the industry and going to the public. And that's what we've done with Smile House in New York City, to really baseline this stuff and to really elevate the profession so that people could be healthier. Yeah.
You bring up a really pertinent point in that dentists are physicians, and the fact that most people go to their dentist regularly. So that's a huge aspect, because now you're starting to build a model over time, if you can integrate that your doctor can get access to, in order to say, hey, you know what, you got some things that align, and what's the trend that's happening here, so that you can get upstream to what could be potential life-altering illness down the road. What are some of the life-altering illnesses that maybe first detected in the mouth that people might be surprised about?
Yeah. So I want to just draw attention to some of these diseases because very interesting science. Dana Orange out of Rockefeller just last year published her research. What did she find? As periodontal disease goes up, rheumatoid arthritis goes up. If you had periodontal disease over COVID, you were 4.8 times more likely to end up on a ventilator. You think about that. Now, how does that happen? It happens because it's one more layer of inflammation. We know what inflammation is. It's designed to protect us, but when it gets overwhelmed, it turns into an autoimmune type disease, and the system really starts to break down. And so to have a cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and also a periodontal disease, which caused what is hard to kind of unpack, but the problem is your inflammatory process, your system, our immune response is completely overwhelmed as all of these, cytokines are starting to, they're all over the body. And, I'm sure you've studied this, that this type of IL-6, C-react, IL-6, IL-1, these inflammatory molecules will wreak havoc on the system when there's too much of them and the body's going into overload. So as dentists, what we look at, and as a standard of care, to get to your question, of course, we're looking at oral cancer. Unfortunately, under 20% of the dental industry really looks at oral cancer screenings at your normal hygiene appointment. So that has to get better. We're on the cusp of saliva testing. AuraDX is a new company, FDA approved, just about done. Check that box. That from saliva, we'll be able to detect very specific oral cancers just from the saliva. Today, we use these special lights, and we look in the mouth, and we're looking for areas and cells that are dysplastic, meaning the tissues and the cells are just starting to change to an area that we have to focus on and get attention. And they're these precancerous dysplastic cells. And so this greening of the area that we look at with these lights, there's a couple different ways to detect. So oral cancer is very important, of course. And the microbiome testing is critically important to our saliva because saliva is protective. It raises the pH. So the two things that break down the mouth is demineralization, where the enamel breaks down, and that's from acid. Remineralization, which we have all these phosphates, these calcium phosphates, these important molecules in the saliva that remineralizes. Anything that breaks that reaction up, you start getting breakdown of the enamel, and then you can get into decay if your diet's a little messy, right? If you have too much sugar, sugar is the enemy, and we know alcohol is the enemy. Those are the two no-nos. All the things that everybody loves, you really got to watch out for. And that's why you want to be on top of your game, because you got to be visiting the dental professionals routinely. But how wonderful would it be if also these dental professionals can also get upstream and build a wellness model where they can detect some early changes, either saliva or a little bit of a blood prick, to now get on a patient portal, and now their doctors are alerted that we got an issue. Back to us working together. And of course, now we have this machine called CBCTs. So to your question, dentists diagnose sleep so well with their medical colleagues. We do sleep tests. There's some great home sleep test company called Sleep Image. We work with our medical colleagues, and the truth of the matter is that the dental profession has some better answers to treat OSA, obstructive sleep apnea. You could be first of all snoring, which is the earliest stage, slight to moderate, moderate to severe, the different severity or levels of sleep apnea. And as you detect that from the sleep test, the doctors and the dentists work closely together on what therapy are we going to use. Many times, sleep issues are obstructive, meaning you have a tightening in the airway. So our cone beams, which are CAT scans, is a standard of care in offices like ours, where top of the nose to the airway, we see how well that airway is. That's where you're breathing. Some people anatomically is small. Under 110, 120 of these square centimeters is small. And then millimeters is very small. And then some people have 300, which is amazing. It's like breathing through, a garden hose. And I always say to the patient, you sleep really well, don't you? Oh, they cannot wake me up. And so, it's all about getting into deep sleep. And people need to get educated about this. James Nestor wrote a fantastic book called Breathe, which got out about 2-3 years ago. And people are now starting to understand how important sleep is and how sleep is one of the pillars of longevity. So think about these pillars. There's 4 of them that the Andrew Hubermans and the Peter Attia talk about, right? They talk about motion. And you know, as an athlete, how important, how well you think when you are working out all the time, right? Motion is so critically important as we age. Nutrition, number 2. The way we deal with stress, right? Mindfulness and meditation, is so critical. Well, I like to add the pillar of oral health. What is your oral health game like? And if you really understand how important it is to have a healthy mouth, you really start to realize that, and we call it dental longevity, that if you have that dental game and you're on your home care, it will lead to longevity. And so these pillars of longevity, these principles that we're all learning by listening to these experts in integrative health, are so fantastic because we have this opportunity to live these longer, more fruitful lives.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
I understand that you are writing a book or about to publish a book on this particular topic because, I listen to all the podcasts of the people in our industry, some of them you referred to, and there's many others out there. And you can kind of see the trends that are happening. But you're the first guy that I've heard talk about oral health and longevity. So this is like a aha moment, like, oh, I never considered that as not only a reference point for working integrated with your medical doctors and getting that regular routine. Because like you said, most people go to the dentist, like, you can have the best theory in the world, you can have the best idea, the best strategy, but you got to implement it. And that those touch points with your experts, that's going to be the critical factor in understanding, number one, where you're at. Number two, whatever protocol that you're implementing, is it working or not working, and how you can make mitigations to that in order to get the outcomes that you want long term. Because we're in the game of preventative medicine. We're in the best way to live a long time is don't get sick, don't get messed up, don't get hurt, don't fall down and break your hip, have enough muscle mass to go on, make sure you're getting oxygen, that your brain keeps working right, and don't get sick, don't get a disease that can take you out, because oftentimes the treatments for diseases are still based on really outdated programs or old school mentality, and can be more damaging or as damaging as the disease itself. Well, you just have to see the references on television when they talk about all the side effects of this latest drug or whatever. You're like, oh, well, exactly. Man, that doesn't look, that doesn't seem like it moves towards health. So with this book, I guess there is an idea that you're going to like, okay, I've got something that people don't know about. I'm building a model of this teamwork demonstration that interacts with doctors. I've already got people coming in for the regularity so that we can get meaningful data. What's the book? The book is to kind of bring this to a broader message, and maybe you can cover some of the points of the upcoming book.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I get on these podcasts, I'm in the profession a long time, and now all of a sudden the science and the research is supporting the notion that us dentists and our medical colleagues need to work closer together. So, as a guy who likes to take action, I hate to sound like Tony Robbins, but we all love Tony Robbins. I had to take action. And with my two sons, and I will tell you, there's a cute story in that we all played lacrosse at Cornell. They're athletes. They had no choice actually, but the poor guys grew up with lacrosse stick in the crib. But anyway, they went full circle. They were in business. They went to Cornell, but they went through the business programs, and they went full circles. We have a foundation, and we do medical dental missions in Eleuthera, Bahamas. Long story how it happened, but Lenny Kravitz, the singer, an amazing person, said, "Doc, you got to help my people." He drags me down to the Bahamas. And sure enough, 12 years ago, we started. We're doing our 10th mission. We were closed for 2 years of COVID. But guess what we did? We brought the medical teams and dental teams working together basically under one roof. And what I saw was the magic started happening. These people had hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and oral health diseases, decay and periodontal disease. And when we worked together, these people got healthy. When we went into the schools and taught the kids the importance of oral health and brushing and nutrition and all the important pillars of motion, of all these stuff. And we had wonderful people from Harvard Public Health, BU, NYU, and Nova. And they're very involved. I'm going on the mission this Thursday, this week, our first mission of the year, basically, our 10th mission. What I saw was magic. And so I said, we're doing this. And we opened this clinic to be this integrated health clinic with a big focus on all these things we can do in dentistry to get preventative, to really take action and figure it out. To your point, Wade, you made such a great point. It's one thing to kind of talk about these things, but once you have the research and the science and it's backing it up, I can go through every disease. Andrea Kamer's group in NYU, that was the first one to show that the P. gingivalis is in the amyloid plaque of these ginger pains, of the breakdown of the bacteria of P. gingivalis in the amyloid plaque of Alzheimer's patients. What is it doing there? It's doing there because it got into the bloodstream and through the blood-brain barrier. So, our science and research, we're really starting to unpack these things. And now we're starting to really understand the relevance of keeping your body fit, keeping as little overriding inflammation, getting into deep regenerative sleep, having a good airway. We do all these mandibular advancement devices. We have expansion of the jaws using MARPs, all kinds of things, all the specialists working together. I didn't mention it, but I have a team of specialists. All of us, orthodontists, periodontists, prosthodontists, technicians, we all work together under one roof. Same concept we did in our foundation called the Glow Good Foundation, glowgood.org, and Let Love Rule, Lenny Kravitz's. And I love it because he's so passionate about health. Anybody see this 61-year-old guy, and you see this guy perform.
He looks
my
amazing.
God. You open his refrigerator, it's all raw. It's all vegetables, raw. He's so disciplined, and he's really an inspiration. And he reflects everything we're talking about. And he's a maniac about the health of the mouth. And he said, "Johnny, you got to help my people," because the people had no access to care, right? It's an imbalance. If underserved communities do not have access to medical and dental. And on that island of Eleuthera, these people have no access. He says they can die from a bee sting. They're walking around in pain in the mouth. And now it was 12 years ago. And so we've made a big impact on the community. And now we're going to these other communities with new partners. But, the action we're taking, we have other practices, like I mentioned, Pacific Dental, that are getting into this integrated model. There's some really great people doing this. And I really believe this will be the future of the industry. We'll see how long it takes. New adoption of new innovation in medicine and dentistry is nothing short of 17 years.
Wow.
A gal named Jill Wade, who's a dentist down in Texas. She's fabulous, fabulous dentist. She's one of the early integrative dentists who are prescient. They're saying, hey, us dentists and physicians need to work together. And, either you share a space or you're the other side of the wall, or you're on the internet in the cloud and you're sharing data, which is what's going to happen in most places. Now we're going to get somewhere. And people will understand, the awareness will build. So the book is really to build awareness with this whole conversation. There's a whole conversation about our children and what they need to do as they're growing up so they develop great jaw size. And so they're nasal breathing, not mouth breathing. Mouth breathing, you can't get into deep regenerative sleep. So when we do a CBCT in the office as a standard of care, we're looking, do you have obstruction? Do you have a deviated septum? Bam, got to get to the NT, because you're not breathing through your nose, you're breathing through your mouth. You are not getting into deep regenerative sleep. We got aura rings and whoops. We can see what's our REM sleep like, what's our deep sleep like. And you can start really through all this great sensor technology to really understand what are the things that I need to do before I go to sleep to make sure I get the right quantity, but really the right quality of sleep. So, all these things are now impacted so much by our new technology. It's quite exciting.
It reminds me of when I first read some of the books from Weston Price, and
Absolutely.
he was talking about the formation of some of the tribal societies. They had these beautiful nasal cavities and wide jaws and teeth development, and he was also checking their health levels and that they exhibited this wonderful level of health. Now, obviously, they didn't have the technology, but there's this lifestyle was conducive to producing this, and then he was comparing it to the high sugar, inflammatory kind of developed diets that had been adapted in North America and other places, and he was like doing this comparison analysis, and he was really in a lot of cases an early medical professional that was able to take the data of that time and project into the future to say, look, you need to start looking at these things and copying these behaviors and avoiding these behaviors because this leads to better outcomes. Just on that topic, based on what you're seeing and what your vision of the future is, right? And the good news about the internet is you don't have to wait. We're not limited by time and space like we used to be before. Like, people can reach out to your blog, or you can get a hold of you, they can get connected to these networks. You can start going to these places. I routinely fly in, for our listeners to know, I have different practitioners around the planet that I go see regularly. Like, I fly into a guy's office in Vancouver. I go to another guy's office in Sedona. I go to another guy's office in Florida, because they're all talking this language. They are dealing with what I call the new model of longevity health. And when I learn from them and I learn from them, and then we cross correlate the data and information. And then now I have a better picture of what's happening in my life, and I can make decisions that are going to lead to better outcomes. What do you envision for this endeavor you're on? Because it's obviously a massive lifelong endeavor that you're committed to here.
Yeah.
What do you see as the potential longevity or health span outcomes that you foresee happening by people implementing this type of approach to their oral health, connected to their physical health, connected to their longevity?
Yeah. Well, I love that question. Thank you for that, Wade. I would say that this integrated model, and we started the conversation about a team approach and collaboration, right? And working together. This integrated model where we are creating processes and systems of working together. What we're doing in New York City is there's an integrated model that's getting built. They have about 4 centers now called Atria Health, that they're doing an amazing job of putting the top docs together, all working very, very collaboratively, working with other hospitals that might be really strong in one area that they're not. There's Tia's Biograph that opened up in New York City. I met with them, and they understand what we're doing in dentistry. So we're developing these partnerships. How do we work together? Because there's things that we diagnose, and also with input questions that they might not have thought of. So there's a lot of learning, but the key is the collab. What I see happening is that it starts up here, because you need, like, people who are taking the risk, they have the capital, they figure out what's the scanners are going to be, how does that all integrate together? And then you got to take it, and I'll use the expression downstream, you got to take it so that it becomes more for everyone. And how does that happen? And that's what has to get figured out, because you're dealing with insurers, insurance companies, you're dealing with, it just starts getting complicated. But the truth of the matter is, and you know this so well, and so many people, like, I throw out these people's names, you know them all. Mark Hyman, who was one of the original on these things, and he says, hey, let's get upstream. We're spending 20% of our GDP on healthcare. Are you kidding me? 4, 5, 6 trillion dollars on healthcare. We spend $1 billion a day on cardiovascular disease. I mean, on and on and on. So if we get early and we help prevent cardiovascular disease, and they talk about a sickness model versus a wellness model. So I think the collaboration, the integration, and I use the word integration, in dentistry, there's these words: biological dentist, holistic dentist. And with all due respect to all these terms, we have our dental specialties. The key is they got to work together. So that's what we do. Put them all in one roof, or just communicate better. And then dentistry has to talk to medicine, because it's separated only political reasons. I'm not going to go back to it, but it's an old story about 1840, the Grand Rebuke, when the dentist knocked on the door and they said, let's create a division. There's actually 2 doctors. Let's create a division of dentistry. No, you open up a dental office. And that's literally what happened. But it's time to change this. And I think when they work together, and when these models, these Atria Health and these Biographs and these companies, Fountain Life, when these companies figure out, okay, this is what we do up here for the people who can really afford these tests. Now, what are we doing for the folks that really require it? We know the statistics: diabetes, obesity. It's 50, 60, 65% of our population. We're hoping that the GLP-1s and the 2-3s are going to change that, and people are going to start getting leaner, and they're going to understand they got to also build muscle at the same time. So our new innovations, our new science, our new research could put us in a much better place. If you look at how long people are living today, we're not living as long as we did 10 years ago. How could that happen with all of our science? So obviously we got to change certain behaviors and lifestyles.
Well, I think to answer that for our listeners, and I think they're probably all on board with this. I remember I got really interested in this in 2003. I saw a paper out of the New England Journal of Medicine by Professor Oshansky that said that the lifespan expectancies in America were going to be worse for the youth than they were for the people present. And it was the first time in American history that that data was released. And it was some of his stuff was corrected by the Bush administration at that time, because they didn't want those outcomes going back as a kind of a bad stamp on the healthcare of America. And now we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years a decline on 2 levels. One, on the absolute life expectancy of Americans to the population at the world at large, and an increase in what they call the disabled element of life, meaning that you're on some sort of treatment, medication that compromises your life moving forward. That's your health span. And that's the difference between the two for our listeners. There's the longevity, how much is your absolute age, and the health span is like how long can you continually do what you do. And what's funny is the more money that we spend from the government tax office and stuff, the worse the outcomes.
Right.
But yet your representative, Atia, et cetera, all of these folks are representative of the people who understand the problem, maybe can't move the big industries or the ossified elements of the agencies and regulatory bodies and all that sort of stuff, and saying, no, the tech is there. The understanding is there. We just got to put a small group of people together with a vision of the future. And by producing a better model, Buckminster Fuller said, hey, don't fight the model that is, produce a model that's so superior that the adaptation happens without question, because it becomes obvious to the end user that that's what we're going. And I think that's what we're going. I think the internet is one of those things. It's exciting to connect oral health into this, because I frankly had little interest. Like, I knew that there was some inflammatory elements in cardiac disease that were related to the mouth and things like that, but I had no idea there was like 57 different illnesses that were connected. And I was like, well, of course it makes sense, but it's called the elusive obvious. So before we wrap up on this, because I'm very
pumped and excited, and I know our listeners, I think it's going to be a great conversation for them because they're going to start, hey, well, let me talk to my dentist. Let me find out. Let me get this book.
Exactly.
Where do people stay up to date on this bleeding edge that you're kind of the tip of the spear on in this field? Like, how do they find out more information? How do they talk to their dentist or their doctor or their things like, hey, do you hear what this guy's doing out in New York? Why aren't you doing this? Come on, you're a slacker. Let's go. Let's get on it. Let's go, team.
You're a slacker. Let's go. I'm another one of, I think I like to think of myself. My podcast co-host is Maria Filipova, and she's awesome. And David Kochman from Henry Schein, who's driving this whole DMI. He's an amazing person. And we're joining together. We're gonna, we'll be doing our podcast together. So that's called Think Oral Health. I'm at Dr. Jon Levine in my Instagram. The new concept is smilehouse.co. Every dentist can just go on our smilehouse.co and take a look at our website and look at what we're talking about and how we take mouth mapping. We look at aesthetics, structure, function, and biology. Every piece of technology I talked about, microbiome testing, CBCTs, all this periodontal testing, all the aesthetic look, because when you got structure, function, biology working well, aesthetics works great, right? And then sometimes we have to, of course, do smile design, and we have all this great what's called a digital workflow, where now, we scan and design on computers and do all kind of printing and CAD CAM. Dentistry is a 180 from 10 years ago. If you are in a dental office and you haven't been there in a couple of years, if you're in an innovative dental office, you shouldn't be able to recognize it. What has happened when it was so siloed, what you saw 30 years ago with the wood wall paneling was still there 25, 30 years later. Today, it's a new day. And that's the way it is with our science and our research. So for me, it's the book that's coming out, which is going to be called Think Oral. So, Think Oral, let's go. And it's all about, oral health is one of the pillars of longevity. And, it's our podcast, Think Oral Health. And smilehouse.co. And I like to be a change agent. Maria and I like to say we're troublemakers. I'm a troublemaker. Let's shake it up. Let's wake up everybody. Come on, the sickness model's got to change. We got to get to a wellness model. And I think I have that from athletics. It's like you got to shake it up. We used to say in lacrosse, we got to rattle their cage, which means, let's go. No nonsense. Stop talking so much. And it's so iterative, it's you start companies, innovation happens with a lot of this Eric Ries MVP model, where you create something that you could build, but you test and you learn, right? Perfection doesn't exist. It stands in the way, right? Everything is progress over perfection. You just keep moving the needle. And that's what's going to happen in healthcare. I think the troublemakers like myself, and the educators and all this great kind of group of people, we are the company we keep. I love that expression. So us like-minded people come together, nudge each other. You do podcasts, everybody, who has something to say starts sharing these ideas. And then, everybody brings those superpowers to the table and the magic happens. And so, you just keep going on it. It's very exciting though today.
Yeah, you touched on something that's really powerful. Perfection doesn't exist. We have a company value of test, learn, grow, and evolve. Let's test it, let's learn from the data, and let's grow and evolve our models moving forward. And I think that's
exactly.
So many people get indoctrinated by the education system of it's a pass or a fail. But Wayne Gretzky said you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Favorite line of his.
It's great. It's beautiful. It's so elegant because it's so true. And you look at the regrets of the dying, and it's not the things that they did in life they regret. It's the things that they didn't do. Right. And you're the inversion of that. And I do believe it's funny. I was a hockey player, and we come down to the States, and people play sports like football and stuff. They say, "Oh God, man, you were a hockey player? That's crazy."
But they don't know that the hockey players all think that the lacrosse guys are crazy. That's a super violent, aggressive sport. I think it originated,
especially in Canada. I mean, indoor box. Oh my God.
yeah, it was originated by the First Nations people, which was called Bag It Away. Bag It Away.
Exactly.
And these were like 3-day events where they were like killing each other. Like it was like really violent. It was a super violent sport. So I think someone that can withstand the rigors of that early in life is prepared to take on industry established ideas or old ways of doing things, and is really poised for success. And so I wish you all of the success in the world. I'm going to be sharing this with all of our friends and clients because you opened up a door in my mind. You know, I have a very special, very forward-thinking dentistry that I go to in Vancouver, Canada. I have coverage here, but I fly to Vancouver to see these guys because they're really good and they're really ahead of and they changed my life. And
good.
The fact that I understand that, but I didn't fully make the connection to what you've shared today. I know that a lot of people in my industry will be going, I hope they all reach out and get you on their podcast and talk to you and interview and get this message moving forward, because maybe we can take that 17 years and cut that down a little bit.
Exactly. Give them all a little nudge. And the truth of the matter is, when people walk into a dental office and they go, "Did you hear?" and he doesn't have an answer, that's the nudge that's going to go, "I better find out." You know, it's a competitive environment we live in. You got to give them a little nudge.
Dr. Levine, this was an awesome podcast. I'm so excited, enthusiastic about what you're doing. It's very exciting. Thank you. Thanks for being on the podcast. For our listeners, all of the links will be in the show notes. Be sure to click on this. And of course, you tucked on one little piece that I don't want to overlook, and that was about educating the children, because when they start building these habits early in life, you don't even have to think about it in the future. We'll do a lot more for our kids than we sometimes will do for yourselves. And oftentimes the kids become the greatest teachers as we get older in life. So let that care for your children also bleed into the health practices of your future.
So right.
I will hope everybody lives a longer, stronger, better life. I'm Wade T. Lightheart from the Awesome Health Podcast at Bioptimizers. We'll see you on the next episode.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.